Have you ever been so kind, so helpful, so available that people started thinking you're weak? Have you ever sacrificed your peace just to keep someone happy only to be taken for granted? Today, I'm not here to tell you to stop being kind. I'm here to tell you, stop being too friendly where it's not valued. Even a tree gives shade, but it does not bend for anyone. You are meant to radiate light, not let others drain it. In this world, we've been told again and again to be kind, to be giving, to spread love. And yes, these are virtues, but somewhere we've misunderstood. Kindness does not mean being a doormat. Friendship does not mean losing your dignity. Too much friendliness, especially with those who do not value your time, your soul, your purpose, can quietly become a trap. The same God who told us to love also gave us the wisdom to discern. We must learn to say no with love, to walk away with grace, and to protect our energy like a sacred temple. Because when your life becomes a marketplace of pleasing others, your inner peace becomes the currency you lose. Today I will share 7 divine lessons, not religious but spiritually rooted truths that will help you live with strength, boundaries, and self-respect. Let's begin. Kindness is a beautiful trait, a divine quality that reflects compassion, empathy, and understanding. But when kindness comes without boundaries, it quietly becomes a form of self-betrayal. It's like pouring water endlessly into a broken cup. No matter how much you give, it keeps leaking away, leaving you empty. In our day-to-day lives, we often wear a smile, offer help, say yes when we want to say no, just to keep relationships smooth, to avoid conflict, or to maintain a reputation of being the good one. But deep within a silent storm brews of exhaustion, frustration, and a strange sense of being used. Let's take a simple example. Imagine a person named Aisha. Aisha is the kind of person everyone calls when they're in trouble. Need a ride? Call Aisha. Need help with work at the last minute? Call Aisha. Need someone to listen to your endless emotional drama? Aisha is always there. People praise her for being helpful, for being selfless. And yes, she feels good at first. But over time, something changes. She starts noticing that people only reach out when they need something. No one asks her how she is doing. No one shows up when she needs help. Her phone is full of chats that start with, "Hey, can you do me a favor?" She begins to feel invisible, like her presence only matters when she's useful. This is the danger of kindness without boundaries. Aisha's story is not rare. It's happening in homes, offices, friendships, and families every single day. So many people are silently screaming inside while smiling outside. They have taught others that they will always say yes. And so no one even thinks to ask, "Is this okay for you?" That's not kindness. That's emotional imprisonment masked as generosity. When you say I to others while saying no to yourself, you're not being kind, you're being unfair to your own soul. And the tragedy is the world rarely tells you to stop. Society rewards self-sacrifice even if it costs you your mental peace. You're told that being good means being available. But the truth is, being truly good also means being wise. Wisdom is knowing to give and when to preserve. Wisdom is knowing that your cup must be full before you can pour into others. Think of your life as a mobile phone. If you keep giving your phone to everyone, letting them drain its battery, handing it over without a charger, one day it will shut down. Mid-conversation, mid-task, mid-help, people will walk away frustrated. But no one will ask why it was never recharged. That's your responsibility, your emotional battery, your mental peace, your spiritual health. They are your sacred duties to protect. Some people may say, but isn't kindness about selflessness? Yes, but not self-erasure. Being kind doesn't mean being absent from your own life. You can be helpful without being drained. You can be generous without being taken for granted. That line is drawn by boundaries. When you tell someone, "I'd love to help, but I need rest right now," you are not being rude. You are being real. And real kindness starts with honesty. Honesty with others, and most importantly, honesty with yourself. Now let's talk about respect. When you set boundaries, you teach people how to treat you. If you're always available, always agreeable, always adjusting, people will assume that's your role. They won't even notice they're crossing the line, because to them there is no line. You never show them one. But the moment you start saying, "I'm not okay with this," or "I need some space," the atmosphere shifts. Some people may react negatively. That's okay. Their reaction is not your responsibility. Your job is not to keep everyone comfortable. Your job is to be in alignment with your inner peace. The most inspiring part of this journey is that once you learn to say yes to yourself, you'll attract the right people, those who don't just take but also give, those who value your time, your energy, your values, your boundaries. You'll begin to see how much stronger your relationships become when they're built on mutual respect, not silent expectations. And more importantly, you'll notice something powerful growing within your self-trust. You'll trust yourself to wisely to speak up, to protect your peace, and to walk away when necessary. That's not just emotional intelligence, that's spiritual intelligence. So next time you feel pulled to say wise, when your soul whispers no, pause, breathe, remember this. Kindness is not measured by how much you suffer for others. True kindness uplifts both the giver and the receiver. It leaves no one drained. Be kind, but not at the cost of your clarity. Be generous, but not at the cost of your joy. Be available, but not at the cost of your value. Kindness is a light. Don't let it flicker in the wind of people's expectations. Shield it with wisdom. Let it shine not because others demand it, but because you choose it with purpose, with balance, and with strength. People don't truly value what is handed to them without effort. This is not bitterness. It's human psychology. What we fight for, what we earn, what we chase after, these are the things we treasure. And when someone gives themselves away too easily, always available, always saying yes, always adjusting, the world begins to see them not as a person of value, but as someone who has nothing better to do. That's why it's sad. People respect what you protect, not what you give away too freely. Let's consider a common example. Imagine a man named Umar who works in an office. He's smart, talented, and very helpful. Every time someone needs a shift covered, he says yes. Every time his boss for extra hours, Umar agrees, even if it means missing his family dinners. He thinks being the go-to guy will win him respect. But weeks turn into months, and instead of being appreciated, he becomes invisible. People don't say thank you anymore. They expect it from him. The more he gives, the less he's seen. The more available he is, the less they consider his time valuable. Umar starts to feel used, taken for granted. But why did this happen? Not because he was unkind, but because he didn't place a boundary between generosity and self-respect. He made himself too accessible, too easy to approach, too ready to sacrifice. And sadly, the world mistook his goodness for weakness. Now contrast this with someone who has clear boundaries. Someone who offers help, yes, but also says, I can't do that right now, or I am already committed. This person may seem tough at first. But slowly people begin to respect them. Why? Because they value their own time. Their attention is earned, not assumed. When they give, people feel honored. When they speak, people listen because their energy is not scattered, it is sacred. Think about a rare gemstone. If you place a diamond on every street corner, soon people will walk past it without even noticing. But place that same diamond in a protected glass case with limited access, and suddenly people admire it, desire it, and recognize its worth. That's the difference between being available to all and being selective. Not out of pride, but out of principle. This principle applies not only in work, but also in relationships. Sometimes in friendships or romantic partnerships, one person gives far more than the other. They call first, they adjust their schedule, they apologize first, even when they're not wrong. At first, it may seem like love, but slowly it turns into imbalance. The giver becomes exhausted and the taker becomes entitled. The relationship is no longer mutual. It becomes a silent performance of sacrifice from one side. And what's worse, when the giver finally pauses or says no, the taker becomes angry. Not because the act was wrong, but because the pattern was broken. When you give too much of yourself without setting limits, you're not just building connections, you're building expectations. And breaking those expectations can feel like betrayal, even when you're finally standing up for yourself. So, how do we shift this dynamic? By understanding one powerful truth: your time, your presence, your energy. These are not unlimited resources, they are your divine assets. You must invest them where they grow, not where they get drained. That means being mindful of who you give your energy to. That means pausing before saying yes. That means recognizing when someone is respecting your time and when they're simply using it for convenience. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, let me think about it. Those 5 words restore your power. They give you space to assess, to breathe, to reflect. You don't owe instant access to anyone. And those who truly value, you will understand. In fact, let's go deeper. What does God teach us through nature? Even the sun, the source of all light and warmth, rises and sets. It gives light during the day, but it rests at night. It shines, but it also disappears so that it's missed, so that people wait for its return, so that its value is remembered. If the self takes time to rest, to recharge, to retreat, why do we think we must shine constantly? This wisdom applies to emotional availability too. If you're always there for someone without ever pulling back to nourish your own soul, you become emotionally exhausted. And when that exhaustion kicks in, resentment follows. That's when kindness turns into bitterness. That's when you start feeling unseen, unheard, and unappreciated. But the truth is, it wasn't them who forgot your value, it was you who never showed them how valuable you are. Start protecting your time, not with walls, but with doors. Doors that open for the right people, for the right moment. Stop apologizing for having limits. Stop justifying your silence. Not every message must be replied to immediately. Not every favor must be accepted. Not every call must be picked up. You are allowed to be selective. You are allowed to put yourself first. Not because others don't matter, but because you do. And once you start doing that, there's something powerful will happen. The same people who once took you for granted will begin to pause before asking. They will speak more gently. They will respect your time, your words, your silence. Why? Because you taught them to. Because you showed them that your kindness is not free-flowing water. It is sacred deep. It is divine and it must be respected. In the end, the world doesn't just respect your love. It respects how you love yourself. And when you protect your energy, you don't just inspire others. You set a standard that they rise to meet. Saying no is one of the hardest things for many people, not because they don't want to say it, but because they're afraid of what will follow. Will the other person get upset? Will they stop liking me? Will I seem selfish, rude, uncaring? These thoughts loop endlessly in the minds of those who are used to putting others first. But here's the truth that often gets buried under guilt. Saying no is not a sin. It is a statement of self-respect. It is a boundary. It is clarity. And in a world that constantly demands more from you, saying no is often the most honest, powerful, and necessary thing you can do for your well-being. Let's imagine a young woman named Hia. She's hard-working, sincere, and always smiling. People love her for her warm nature, and she is always ready to help. Whether it's staying late at work, covering for a colleague, or attending every family event, even if she's emotionally drained. But behind her constant is a person who is secretly exhausted. She sacrifices sleep, skips meals, cancels her own plans, and swallows her own stress just to meet others' expectations. And even then, people find ways to complain. Why didn't you reply earlier? You could have done a little more. Hia begins to feel like no matter what she gives, it's never enough. Her kindness, instead of bringing her peace, is now her prison. One day, her younger sibling asks her, "Do you ever get tired of saying yes to everyone?" She smiles weakly, then quietly says, "Every single day." That one sentence speaks volumes. It reveals a life where the word no has been buried under layers of obligation, guilt, and the fear of disappointing others. But what Hie and so many like her don't realize is that every eyes that comes from fear, from pressure, from guilt, is actually a no to herself. It is a rejection of her own needs, her own rest, her own time. What would happen if she started saying no? At first, the world might resist. People may raise eyebrows, act surprised, or even push back. But slowly the atmosphere would shift. People would realize her time is not for free. Her energy is not an unlimited resource. She's not a machine. They will begin to treat her like a person. That respect begins with one word. No. Let's look at this differently. If you walk into a shop and ask for a product and the seller says, "I'm sorry, we're closed for the day," you don't get offended, you accept it. Why? Because you respect their boundary. You understand that every place, every service, every person has limits. But somehow when it comes to our personal lives, we forget this. We feel we must always be available, always agreeable, always giving. But you were not created to be on call for everyone's needs. 247. You were created with purpose, with rhythm, with the right to rest and recharge. Saying no also teaches people not to assume. Often when you constantly say yes, people stop asking and start expecting. That's where entitlement begins. They stop seeing your effort. They stop thanking you. And if one day you hesitate or decline, they treat it as betrayal. Not because you did anything wrong, but because they were never taught to value your limits. But once you start saying no when it's necessary, you teach people how to appreciate your lies. It becomes meaningful again. It becomes a gift, not a default. Imagine a man named Salman. He has always been the one agreed to every social gathering, every extra responsibility, every favor. He never wanted to disappoint anyone. But over time he noticed something painful. People didn't really care how he was doing. They cared about what he could do for them. That's when he decided to change. He began to prioritize his time. He stopped overcommitting. He stopped saying yes to things that drained him. At first, some people were confused. Few were upset. But eventually something beautiful happened. He began to feel alive again. He had time for his passions. He reconnected with his peace. And the people who truly loved him stayed. The ones who left, they were only there for what he could offer, not for who he was. This transformation begins with the courage to say no without apology, to pause before agreeing, to honor your needs without guilt, to understand that your worth is not tied to how many people you please. You are not defined by how much you give away. You are defined by how much you value yourself and show others how to value you too. Saying no doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you're arrogant. It simply means you're wise enough to protect your energy for the things that truly matter. You become more intentional, more focused, more peaceful, and in the long run, you become more available not to everyone but to the right people in the right ways at the right time. So, if you've spent years swallowing your no just to keep others happy, maybe it's time to reclaim it, not of rebellion but out of self-love. Speak it softly, speak it kindly, but speak it clearly. Because when you finally learn to say no without guilt, you open the door to a life that says yes to your soul. Not everyone deserves an explanation. It's a truth that sounds bold, even rebelling chose, but it's one of the most freeing and self-empowering realizations a person can have. So many of us live trapped in the constant pressure of over-explaining ourselves. Why we didn't reply, why we said no, why we chose a certain path, why we feel a certain way. And while honesty and clarity are important, there is a line where explanation becomes emotional exhaustion. When you start feeling the need to justify every small decision in your life to keep others comfortable, you slowly begin to less for yourself and more for their approval. Consider the story of Zainab, a young woman who is thoughtful and kind. She deeply cares about others and naturally she also cares what others think of her. But this kindness becomes a heavy burden when she doesn't show up for an event. She feels the need to type long messages explaining every detail. I was tired. There was traffic. I wasn't feeling well. When she chooses not to engage in a group activity, she over-justifies. I had to help my parents. I had office work. I didn't mean to ignore anyone. And still sometimes people question her. Are you okay? Is something wrong? You've changed. No matter how carefully she explains it, never feels enough, and slowly she realizes she's giving more energy to defending her choices than actually living them. This is the trap of over-explaining. It comes from a place of fear, the fear of being misunderstood, judged, or rejected. But the reality is, no matter how clearly you speak, people will still see things through their own filters. You could write 1,000 words, but someone with a closed heart will still twist your silence into offense. You could bend over backward to explain your decisions, and still someone might say you think you're better than us. So what's the point? The truth is, the people who trust you don't need long explanations, and the ones who don't trust you won't believe them anyway. There's wisdom in brevity. There's strength in being okay with being misunderstood. It takes emotional maturity to say, I don't owe anyone my life story just to make a simple choice. You can decline an invitation with a smile and no reasons. You can distance yourself from toxic environments without explaining why. You can rest, reset, and recharge without sending updates to everyone. Your inner peace doesn't need to be debated.